Welcome everyone to today's webcast, Building Chrome Packaged Apps, co-presented to you today by Kendo UI and the Google Chrome team. We're really excited about the content we have for you today, and we're really excited about packaged apps and what you can do. So we thank you for taking some time out of your day to come spend the next hour with us learning how you can build packaged apps too. If you're not following Kendo UI on Twitter, we'd encourage you to do that at Kendo UI, a great place to keep up with news and announcements around both Chrome packaged apps as well as things happening with Kendo UI. Take a moment to do that. And it's a good time to do it because just by being in today's event, as a reminder, you're also in the drawing for one of 10 Chromebooks. So we will be drawing from the attendees at today's event, 10 random winners for Samsung Chromebooks. We will post the winners to our Twitter account, the reason you should follow. And we also contact the winners directly via email. So don't worry, we'll contact you if you win. No need to check in with us. We'll post those names so you guys know who the lucky winners are. So also one more note before we turn over to our great presenters for today. If you have questions at any point during today's event, please use your Q&A manager in the tools on your screen. Log your questions. I will play as today's moderator, so I will be feeding questions to our presenters, and we'll have an extended Q&A period at the end of today's content for questions that don't get answered during the course of the event. Other than that, I think it's now time to turn the floor over to the first of our two presenters today. Developer advocate from Google, Paul Kinlan, is going to kick things off. So you'll see your screens flash briefly, and then you should hear Paul and see his screen in just a moment. So Paul, the floor is yours, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
Cool, thank you. Right, cool. Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Kinlan, developer advocate at Google. I'm really pleased to be here. This is kind of the first time that we've done, I think, one of these kind of, one of these screencasts outside of what we normally do inside the Hangouts. Anyway, I'm Paul Kinlan. I'm based in London. It's rather dark over here at the moment, but it's pretty nice. And if you want to get in contact with me, feel free. Paul Kinlan on Google+, Paul Kinlan on Twitter, and also Paul Kinlan at google.com. And basically today we're going to show you some really great stuff around what we've been working on with Chrome applications. So let's get started. I'm not going full screen today because I've got some stuff to show you outside of the browser. But anyway, let's get started. So we've done a lot of work recently with applications, especially around Chrome OS and the way that people use applications on the web, their web applications. And we found that there's a number of problems with not necessarily the web. I mean, that's a really bad way to characterize it, but there's actually quite a few problems with the way that we build applications and the applications that users want. And we've categorized like a list of features that we think applications should be, right? They should have. So we believe that all applications, they should work offline by default. And what we mean by this is that you don't have to have a connection, internet connection to launch and use the application. We also believe that they should be secure, right? I mean, if you're building an application which potentially is written in HTML and JavaScript, we know from the past in like the 90s and the early 2000s that cross-site scripting attacks are actually relatively easy to do on the web, and you have to lock down your application. And we don't want applications that, in theory should look and feel native to suffer from the security vulnerabilities that we've known on the web in the past, especially if we've got extra access to devices. So the interesting thing is if we've got access to devices, whether it's USB or Bluetooth, we don't want people to do a cross-site scripting injection attack on our application. And as developers, and probably all the developers in this group today, is that we're all building applications either normally on the web with HTML and JavaScript. We should be able to build those same applications, complex applications, with all the attributes above with that same technology: HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS. So that's the things that we want to try and do. And I'm going to run through some of the things that why each of these points are important as well. And I know Burke later on is going to show you exactly how to build these applications, and he's going to show you some really nice stuff, but I'm going to run through some of the, what it actually means and why we're doing it at least. So we have Chrome applications. We believe that Chrome applications are actually pretty cool and pretty powerful and can do all the things that we want our applications to do. That is offline first, secure by default, with extra access to hardware. Now this is pretty boring in the sense of this is just a screenshot, so I actually want to show you some applications in real life. So if this all works, I will jump to my next screen. And this is a set of applications which, they're pretty cool, right? I mean, these are applications, they, in theory, are launched outside of the browser. They're not actually inside a browser tab like you would expect a normal web applications to be. And in some cases, we can even control the entire Chrome of the screen. So this little weather application on the right-hand side, it hasn't got the traditional kind of Chrome buttons that you'd expect on any normal native application. You as a web developer are in completely control of this surface. So that's pretty powerful. So let's just jump back to the presentation, and I'll actually show you some of the really cool stuff. The reason why we think, I'll probably start again, right? So the interesting thing is that we have a lot of access to extra devices and specific APIs that are only available on native platforms. However, we don't think that's the most important thing. The most important thing, in the way that we've watched users, and I've watched users in particular use applications inside the browser, is if they know that their application is offline, they're not connected at the moment, sorry, and they know that their browser is offline from the web, well, they're not going to launch their browser to go and launch a web application. And we think this is fundamentally wrong, right? We want users to be able to use your web applications even when they're offline, and we don't want them to have to go through that whole discovery process of launching the browser to then launch an application. So the whole idea of offline by default, I will just show you some experiments that we've done, is that I took about the top 50 to 100, I think it's about 85 in the end, applications from Android, and I did the same on iOS, for iPhone and iPad. And I basically analyzed how they worked offline. So I let the user, well, me in this case, I downloaded the app and then I went straight offline. So I went into airplane mode and I wanted to see what the first run experience of a native application was. And actually, on Android and iOS, the experience is pretty good, right? You have, in most cases, like an experience with the application. So the one in the middle here right now it's the Sky at Night application, basically. And that works completely offline. You don't actually have to do anything other than maybe use the GPS to actually understand, kind of look at the night sky and understand what's going on. And then there's some other applications where, obviously there's a license check which needs to connect to the internet. They don't work very well. And there's some games as well, for instance. Games will download the shell of the application and then the rest of the content after. But the fundamental thing is, within every single experience of a native application, you're actually inside the user is actually inside the app experience. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty nice. And it's, well, you know what? I'll show you what it's like on the web. So I did exactly the same thing with offline web applications. So I went and found maybe the top, I think it was actually the top 20 because I stopped it quite early. So the top 20 web applications to see how they worked offline. And it was really bad, right? I mean, most applications just had this unable to connect to the internet. And this is basically because developers haven't built their applications to work offline. There are some exceptions, and this is a great application called Every Time Zone, and I used this to make sure I was, I actually arrived at this presentation at the right time today. But basically, this uses a technology called App Cache to enable your applications to work offline. And it's nice. Some of the features and functionality don't work, like the tweet button doesn't work, but the majority of the functionality is it's nice. It works offline regardless of internet connection. And the summary is, basically, if you're wanting an app experience, right now, native applications, they win hands down, right? And the main reason is that the user is kept inside that application experience. So the I've just seen some comments about App Cache. App Cache is not a great thing at the moment. But essentially, our applications, when we compare our web applications against native applications, we can't win in this whole offline scenario. And when I asked a whole load of developers, why don't you make your applications work offline? And the main thing is that they say is I will add offline support to my application. That's because the web and the browsers are inherently connected to the internet all the time, and the way that we've been brought up to make applications on the web is to make them online, synchronize with the server, and maybe render all the content on the server and push it back out to the screen. And then when you go to a normal app developer, well, their model is everything works offline by default, and you have to integrate online support and functionality into your application. And it's a fundamental kind of change in the way that you build applications. And we want developers to be able to do what they do best on the web, is have the ability to have an online presence in your application easily, but have offline first. So we want people to be able to say, well, this application framework supports offline, and I'm going to add on the things I expect to work online into your application. And we think we've got a nice kind of balance with Chrome applications, at least. We want our applications to be secure as well, and I know Burke's going to talk about this a little bit later, but, well, I think he is. But content security policy, right, is a technology that's out there. Relatively... Yes, cool. Phew. So the the content security policy is relatively new and it's relatively immature, but the idea behind it is it's directly designed to pretty much stop and prevent cross-site scripting attacks inside applications, whether they're on the web or kind of what we're doing with Chrome applications now. So there are some basic things that we've done in Chrome apps. We don't allow eval, so that you basically, it basically allows you to execute JavaScript dynamically just by passing in a string. We don't allow that, and obviously this causes some issues and things that you're going to have to work around on the platform. But this is an area where actually, if you allow eval into your application, it doesn't take much of an error in your kind of templating logic or your code to be able to sometimes execute unwanted JavaScript that the user has actually put into maybe, say, a text field or something. And the same goes for new function, and likewise with inline script. So inline script is like, what we mean by this is script tag in the main body of the application, or in the main body of the HTML with the code in. And we've seen a lot of exploits on the web in the past where it's been an unfiltered text box which is rendered directly to the screen, and all you have to do is open a script tag, alert hello, close the script tag, and then all of a sudden you've like directly injected code into someone else's website. We don't want that. We don't want to allow that to happen. And then I've got this other bit here where it says no external scripts are allowed. That's like you can't load jQuery from an external source or any other kind of libraries externally. That's not really a security thing. That's more of like the offline thing in the sense that the script tag at the moment doesn't have any semantics of whether it was correctly fetched or not. So you can't hook into the script tag to say, this script tag didn't load, so we need to go and do something else. We don't want users to not have basic functionality in their application. So we don't allow, via content security policy, external scripts to be loaded. However, we understand that actually this can cause problems with the way web developers are expecting their applications to work. So we do have this kind of sandboxed escape hatch, essentially, which allows you as a developer to use, like, essentially kind of eval a new function, the things that you would expect for template in an inline script. But it's never going to get access to the direct access to the advanced functionality you have inside of Chrome app. We also want to integrate with other APIs, and what we mean by this is that you should be able to integrate with any third-party service just with 1 or 2 lines of code. And I really want to show you this demo because I think it's kind of quite nice. Is that this doesn't look nice at all. It's going to do something really cool. It's going to log into Instagram. Paul_Kinlan, my password. It's the same as my bank password. Oops, shouldn't say that. Oh God. There we are. So here we go. So what we have here is an authenticated request against the Instagram API. And if I quickly just jump into the code, you're not going to see much here, but the really powerful thing for me is that it's just this one JavaScript line that starts that whole flow for authentication off. And it's not a Google-specific thing. You can authenticate against Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these different services. And then you can do whatever you want with with the application once you've got access to it. I think it's pretty cool. It's pretty nice, and it's just a pretty nice example of what we're trying to do inside the platform. We also want to give you device access, and that includes things like USB serial port, Bluetooth. These are the things that users expect their applications to have on their platform if they were running a native application. And we don't want your web application to be limited like the way that web applications are. They can't access USB right now. They can't access serial port. We want to make it so that you can access these things. And interestingly enough, for me, and I'm going to show you 2 demos here, is network sockets, which is kind of key really for us. If you've ever used IRC, hopefully my friends won't. Hello from a screencast. This is just a normal IRC client, and essentially what's happened here is rather than proxy through via web requests through an external like web service, we have a direct socket, a normal POSIX TCP. Hello, screencast Kinlan. We have a normal TCP POSIX socket, which allows us to connect directly to the IRC channel. We don't have that in web applications, and that's actually pretty powerful. And then we've got this other thing here is file system access. We don't have access to a file system in the browser directly right now on the web. We want to enable you to be able to get hold of a file from the user's file system once the user has let you do it, file, and then save it back out to the same place. Right now on the web, you can't do that. And we also have nice little notifications as well. And then we've got media gallery support as well. And I'll show you media gallery because this is relatively new, but it allows you to get access to an entire directory structure, but only for certain pre-granted types of galleries. So if I do get gallery info, my MacBook has got 3 different types of devices, 3 different types of galleries: music, pictures, and movies. Let's just go and select. We'll add them. That's fine. We don't need to add any more in. We'll scan the galleries. And what's happened here is that the operating system has given me, given my application access to the, say, the pictures folder, because I've let them do it, and then I can scan through. That's a picture of me and my son. Hello. I'm trying to be cool. I'm not that cool. But the really cool thing is, this is directly accessing the file system and not having to proxy it through kind of some bizarre piece of JavaScript and hackery-pokery with an input type equals file. It's just one API call to get access to a list of files inside a directory, which then lets you read in, and then if you wanted to, edit and save back out. So that's pretty cool. Let's just jump back. We don't get this in web applications, and this is what we want you to be able to do with this platform, at least. And the whole point for me about this is that we want these applications to work everywhere, right? The power of the web is that it's ubiquitous. It's a ubiquitous platform in that you, in theory, can access any website, any application from any machine, and also kind of near enough, in theory, any browser. And the native applications, you can't do that. They're normally kind of quite tied down to individual platforms, right? You have to make a bespoke application for each platform that you go to. And we want applications to have that kind of same ubiquitousness, if that's a word, as the web. And so the interesting thing about this is our applications, when you make these applications, will run on Windows, Mac, and Linux, the places that you expect them to run. And I've highlighted mobile as well, because we haven't really told too many people about it so much so far, so you're some of the first people to know about it, which is pretty cool. But we want our applications to run on mobile, and what we mean by this is that your application that you build from on top of the Chrome package, essentially, should run on, say, an iPhone and iOS device. And if I get this right, I actually have a demonstration here for you right now, where this is the web application. It's the same application that you see here. That, however, is running natively on this device. There's still some things that we're working out around this at the moment. It's not as smooth as we would like, but so this is where my grandparents used to live, Heswell. There we are, Heswell. I've added it in. I've actually added it in twice. There's a couple of bugs in the application as well. But this is pretty cool, right? We have a native-looking application running inside our platform. Now, the cool thing about this is it's not anything that we've done in particular with Chrome. We're actually using PhoneGap and Cordova and then mapping our APIs onto that existing work that the Apache guys and the PhoneGap guys have done to kind of deploy applications to multiple platforms. So I think that's pretty nice and that's pretty cool. And that's kind of ultimately where we're going. If you go on GitHub and look for Chrome mobile applications, you will see the GitHub repository where we're kind of working on at the moment. It's pretty low-key. We're not making too much of a fuss about it because right now the development experience isn't great. We don't want to kind of put you guys off. But that's something that you can kind of watch and see how it grows. It's going to be pretty nice. Now, I want to show you some other stuff as well. If any of you guys have ever used Node.js, well, there's a project called Browserify, which you can basically take any NPM module and bring it into your application. And you can do that in the browser. It's pretty cool, but obviously you can do this in the Chrome application. So there's an application here called a Markdown editor. So it's hello, Kendo UI friends, all speaking. And I can do quite a few things. I can save the file out. I can make a new file. I can open a file off my desktop, kind of choose it and bring it back in. I'm not going to do it just yet because I've got to hurry up a little bit. But the interesting thing is that the Markdown editor was done by another developer. Well, the Markdown logic essentially was done by another developer on the web, and I've just been able to bring all that logic into my application with this one line of code here, and then respond and render out the actual Markdown functionality into the application. So that entire application that I just showed you a couple of seconds ago, it honestly really isn't more than maybe 20 or 30 lines of code. Obviously, there's other bits to save and read files in, but the core functionality is maybe 10. That's 4 lines of code, 5 lines of code, and counting the require as well. So the basic functionality is like 5 lines of code. That's really powerful stuff. But the interesting thing is that obviously we talked about network sockets before, and Node is a great web server. But wouldn't it be cool if you could bring, how to say this, a web server into the browser or any type of server built on Node.js into the browser? Well, there's actually a couple of guys in Atlanta, IceDev, who actually built HTTP Chromify, built off the back of the network socket library that I built that maps Node APIs to Chrome APIs. So you could build a web server, and this is actually a web server in 3 or 4 lines of kind of your developer code. Obviously, there's a lot more code behind the scenes, but all you have to write is this. And the interesting thing is, actually, this entire presentation has been served off a web server that I wrote, not actually using Node in this case, but using the socket API. So we go to source. There's the socket API. Get the network list to get a list of network devices. That's pretty cool. We don't have that on the web, and I think this is pretty powerful once you can bring this into your applications. I'm really excited to see things like FTP servers and SSH servers being built into the browser so that you can just connect to it locally when you're on a Chromebook and you're offline. That's going to be so powerful. It's going to be so cool. So, what's it take to create your first application? Well, I'm going to be super quick here, and it's going to be super simple. The first thing you need is a manifest, and I will just show you what it looks like actually in an application here. It's a manifest. Name test is the name of the application. The version number. It's a four decimalized number. It's a little bit weird, but you can get around it. You need a thing called manifest version 2. Manifest version 2 basically says this is going to be a Chrome app, and then some launch icons. So here we have the launch icons, and then the definition of the app. Now, all you have to really do for the app is specify what launches in the background, what is running before your application is launched. And in our case, we've made a file called main.js. So let me just jump into main.js to see what this application is going to do. As soon as Chrome recognizes it's supposed to be launching or running this application, it will load this file. And then it'll register some listeners. So chrome.app.runtime on launched is basically a handler for when you press or the user presses on the icon. Now these icons essentially in the future are going to live outside the browser, so they're going to look and feel more native, but right now they're inside the new tab page. So if you launch an application, and I do it correctly, it fires the onLaunched event, which then creates a window, which if we look here, chrome.app.window.create index.html. So if we split the window, index.html, hello Kendo friends, that's exactly what we saw before, and then we can specify some metadata about the actual window that we're going to create. So you can specify width, height, min width, max width, and a whole load of extra things around that. That's pretty much all there is to actually creating your very first application, and I've got a couple of slides that are exactly the same as before. That was just in case my editor didn't work. There really isn't that much else to actually create your very first application. There are a lot more APIs that you can delve into if you want to start accessing network sockets and a whole load of things like this. But from a very high level, if you have a web application today, you could in theory, relatively easily port your application to make it into the offline container with very little effort. So, where are we? Well, if you want to learn more, we have some weekly videos at this URL, google.com/ODZDB. We have our docs as well, so let me just open the docs up. You know what the silly thing is, I didn't actually make these as a link because I thought, oh, no one's going to need to click on them. We have a nice set of developer documentation that you can go through and a complete list of all the JavaScript APIs, so the Bluetooth commands, context menus, file system APIs. But anyway, it's on that short link there, and also we have a nice sample repository on GitHub, github.com/Google Chrome /Google Chrome app samples. And you'll be able to see all the kind of the applications that we've worked on and we've demonstrated today already in that repository, so you can kind of dive into the code, edit it, and play with it. And that's pretty much it. I know there's one area that we haven't talked about just yet. It's this idea of distribution. Right now, all the applications are going to go through the Chrome Web Store. That's the easiest thing to say. They're going to go through the Chrome Web Store and they're going to be installed. And if you're on Windows, you will see that in Chrome Canary, there's a special launcher for your applications. We're still working on this whole idea of how the applications should launch, but we're fully expecting the applications to be on the start menu in the desktop area if the user wants them to be there as well. And with that, I would like to hand over to Burke.
Perfect. Now, as we transfer to Burke, everybody, I just want to remind you, if you have questions that are going through today, please log those questions in the Q&A manager. Already some great questions coming in there. As a reminder, we'll spend time at the end addressing as many of these questions as we can. As Burke takes over the presentation, Paul, a question that came through here, somebody asked, will the Chrome packaged apps work on Chrome for mobile?
So right now, the Chrome packaged apps, when we say Chrome for mobile, they're two separate things. There's Chrome for mobile, which is like the Chrome browser on Android and iOS. The way that we've got these Chrome apps right now and the way that we're running with it is via Cordova. So that's actually technically two separate things. On Chrome for Cordova, they will use the WebView. That's like installed like directly with that system. So on iOS, we'll definitely use the iOS WebView. Perfect.
And a lot of people are asking, and I'll mention this here, your screen's going to flash and Burke's presentation is going to come up on the screen here. And while that's happening, somebody else is asking about the links you showed. Will those be available for people to find afterwards? Is there a good
Yeah,
place for people to
I'll
follow
tweet
up
them
with
all
you?
out. If you follow me in Paul_Kinlan, or I'll give you guys the links as well if you want to share them out post after this presentation. I'll make sure they're all shared out.
Perfect. All right. Well, there's some other great questions in here, and we'll address more of these questions at the end. But for now, the stage is turned over to Burke to keep us going on today's packaged apps presentation.
Sweet. All right. Paul, that was great, man. What I did notice is that it's really, really cold in London. That's what I got from that presentation. It's like 2 degrees, 1
Yes,
degree,
it's
something
cold,
like
it's
that.
windy, it's raining, it was snowing this morning. It was, yes, yes.
It's like
It's one of
60,
Liverpool, right?
it's 65 degrees here. I don't want you to be jealous, but I'm going to go out running later without a shirt on. It's going to be great.
Well, we're in Celsius and you're in Fahrenheit, I think, so I have trouble converting.
That's true. 65 Celsius would be uncomfortable, wouldn't it?
Yes, your skin would melt, I think.
All right. All right, so that was great. I learned a ton. I've been working with the packaged apps since back, when they were pre-released with you guys, and I learned a ton just now. This is a super exciting thing for me to be able to talk about this. I've been doing this for a while. For those of you that have tuned in webinars before, we have shown the camera app off, and let me just launch that again for those of you who have not seen it yet. I'll just pull that up. And hi, there we go. Can everybody see me? It's pretty nice. I have a special treat for you. It's not every day you get to see somebody with a Minecraft head on. And then it's got some neat filters that we can access here. And actually, my doc's a little bit too big, so let me shrink it down here. It's kind of getting in my there we go. My resolution. There we go. We can apply some WebGL filters and do some pretty cool stuff. Even some face tracking in here. It's a lot of fun. And the cool thing about this is, my capture button I think is obscured. Yeah, it is. But the cool thing about this is that this application runs on Windows, it runs on OS X, it runs on Chrome OS, it runs everywhere, which is completely awesome. This is something we've been talking about in the developer world for quite some time, and for the first time we're actually seeing that. So really, really neat. And we'll come back to this application later. But let's go ahead and take a look at how we build an application. Let me bring my doc back up here because I made it teeny tiny. So I'm going to start with pretty much a blank slate. I've got some CSS and JavaScript. This is just the Kendo CSS files, and this is the Kendo JavaScript files and jQuery, and then this plugin file that we'll talk about here in a minute. But other than that, this package is completely blank. So I'm going to go ahead and add some of the files that Paul talked about. So the first one I'm going to create is a manifest file. So I'll create that. I'm going to create a HTML file that we're going to show, and I'm going to create a background file that is going to be the first thing that launches that actually spins up the main HTML as the content of the window. So as he said, we do need to have a valid manifest, so let me go ahead and add in a manifest here. And I'm using some snippets today because I'm super lazy. Let me add in those 4 digits. So this is our Hello World app. This is the name, the description, the version, of course the manifest version, and you can see that in our case we're going to load this background.js file. Well, that file needs to load the main file just as Paul showed us. So in the background file, we'll jump over here, and now I'm going to take the sidebar out, and let's go ahead, and what we need to do is we need to add a listener to the loaded event for the runtime. So let me pull that up here. Take a look at my snippets. That's the on-launched event. So when the packaged app launches, it fires this event, and inside of here we can actually create our window. So let's do that. And in my Windows case, it's pretty much the same as Paul's, except for I've added a few more constraints. He had a width and a height. I'm adding a min width and a min height, so they can't change the size of the window, and I'm actually positioning it, giving it top and left positions there. And then we're just going to load in the main HTML file. So let's add some content to our main HTML file. So I'm going to go ahead here and add some content, and we'll just do we're just doing Hello World, right? Hello World. I can handle that. Hello Worlds. And that's of course all we need to do. Now I'm going to pull up Chrome, and these are in Chrome proper, so you don't need a Canary for all. Most of the APIs that we're going to talk about today are in Chrome proper. There's a few that are still experimental that you need Chrome Canary for. The good news is Canary and Chrome proper run side by side, so feel free to install those. You won't hurt yourself in any way. You won't hurt your main Chrome installation. It's really neat. So let's pop open Chrome. There I am on Twitter. And let's head over to the extensions and actually install this extension. Now, if when you first install Chrome, it kind of comes in like this. You can check this developer mode, and you can click on this load unpacked extension. Let me just make sure I'm all good here. All right, and so let's go ahead and load this unpacked extension, and I'm going to find it. It's Hello World right here. And you can see it pops in. There it is right there. Now, I can launch this a couple ways. I have this app launcher here, which is a plugin, but they're also available right here off the home screen. So I can just hit it, and there it is. It pops up. So pretty easy to create a packaged app, as you can see. That's all there is to it. Let's change the requirements just slightly. Instead of doing just printing it out, oops, sorry about that.
Yeah,
yep, sorry.
Audio up. There we go. We're back.
Audio, sorry. All right, good. All right, my bad. We're back. All right, so got a little off track there. So inline scripting. Let's go ahead and, of course, we know this is blocked because Paul already talked about it. But what I want to do is, I just want to show you guys exactly what the CSP looks like, and then how we're going to get around it, because it's important to talk about that before we can talk about building with Kendo UI. So let's just do an alert. Hello worlds. There we go. I can't even spell worlds right. All right, perfect. Now, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and come back, and we'll just reload. And we reload, and nothing happens. So what we can do now is we can inspect this the same way that we would normally inspect a web page. And you can see that I pull up the developer tools, and down here you can see that refuse to execute inline script because it violates the following content security policy. All right. So we can't use inline script. And the fix for this is pretty easy, right? All we need to do is create a JavaScript file and include that instead. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file here. I'm going to put it in the JS folder, and we'll call it main.js. There we go. And then you can see that it's over here. All right. All right, perfect. So now that we're in this main.js file, I'm just going to go ahead and put our alert in there, and we'll save that. And then back here, I'm just going to add this in right here, and we'll say the source is main.js. There we go. I better close that script tag off. Not quite Sublime Text, but close. Okay, so if everybody's still with me, I'm just including this main.js file, which is going to show the alert. All right, that's the only change that I've made. So I'm going to come back, I'm going to refresh this, and let's see. Oh, it looks like I gave it the wrong. I put it in the JS folder. There we go. So now when we run it, you see a different kind of error. Window.alert is not available in packaged apps. Well, that's unfortunate because I really want to show my message in an alert box because I love alerts. Well, unfortunately, we can't use an alert, so we're going to use a Kendo UI modal window instead. So in order to do that, we need to add in our Kendo CSS, so let's do that. And if you've used Kendo before, this is just like you normally would, with the exception that you can't use CDN references, but you wouldn't want to in a packaged app anyway, that I can think of a good reason for. And then we'll add in the JavaScript down here. There we go. So we got the jQueries, the Kendos. Let me close this quote off, make that legit. All right. And then let's create a little bit of HTML here. So we'll have a div, give it an ID, and then inside of that, let's create an H3 tag, and we'll just say hello worlds again. And down in the JavaScript, or excuse me, over in our main file, let's go ahead and turn this div into a Kendo window. So let's do that. So I'm going to come back here, and we'll just select it and say our hello window, selected by its ID, and we'll just say it's Kendo window. And we're going to center it and open it. There we go. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward stuff. This should give us a pop-up window. So I'm going to come back and refresh here. And you see that we did not get exactly what we planned on getting. In fact, we got something really kind of disgusting. That's this thing right here. And it says invalid template, which is kind of confusing because we didn't declare a template. So we could come back and do some debugging and say, well, I don't know, take this piece of JavaScript out. Maybe I did that wrong. Reload, and we still get the error, which is really weird because I didn't do anything with Kendo UI. All I did was include it. Well, as it turns out, as Paul said, one of the things that the CSP blocks is new function, which is what Kendo UI uses to compile its templates. And it has templates that are built in, like basic templates. If you don't provide one, it provides one for you. And those are blocked, and so we can't even add Kendo UI to the page. But Paul talked about that escape hatch, and that's the sandbox. So all that we need to do to really get around this is to come into the manifest and declare our sandbox. So I'm going to come here and say sandbox, and then inside of the sandbox is an object, and you can have pages. So you can have multiple sandbox pages. It's an array, and then inside of that we'll put the main.html. There we go. And then I'm going to come back here, and so when you make changes to the manifest, you generally have to reload the extension here, or at least that's been my experience. Maybe Paul can correct me later. But pop it back up, and let's see, what did I do wrong here? Is it still mad at me? It's selected by the wrong element. Let me move this over here, check our tools. But you see we're not getting the error anymore that we were getting before. And that's because we've declared that the main file is actually a sandbox page. So let me just come back here, check here. It's because I took this code out. So let's put that back and reload. All right, so now we have a Kendo window inside of the Chrome packaged app, and we're good to go. And at this point, you may be thinking, okay, problem solved. Well, yes, but not exactly. So the next problem that we have is that all of the cool APIs that Paul was showing us, like the TCP sockets and the notifications, a lot of that really cool stuff is not available to the sandbox, as in we cannot touch it. And so we need to devise a way to communicate from the sandbox and call Chrome APIs. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to actually have two pages. One of the pages is going to hold our API calls, or the Chrome API calls rather, and the other page is going to actually hold the application. And this is exactly how the Chrome Cam application that we just looked at works this exact same way. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. The first thing I need to do is I need to add another file. So I'm going to add an index file, which is actually going to hold my application. And then I'm going to take that index file, and I'm actually going to display it inside of the main page using an iframe, like that. So I'm just referencing index.html, and then in the manifest, I'll change this to index.html. Let's grab our, well, we moved our HTML already, and then we don't need this over here anymore since we're going to be doing this inside the index page. Now, in the index page, because we're in the sandbox, open that up, there we go. Because we're in the sandbox, we can do pretty much anything we want. So I can come down here and I can do inline script. And let's move all the Kendo stuff over since this isn't sandbox anymore. So we'll grab the styles, we'll put those here, and we'll grab the JavaScript. There we go. And I'm actually going to leave jQuery in because we're going to need that bad boy in just a second. And put the JavaScripts back over here. All right, so we're all set up here, and we can actually do inline scripting here. So I can say script, and then I can write whatever I want inside of here and kind of just go nuts because I'm in the sandbox, and so I can do, I guess, kind of whatever I want. So we can write the same code here, and then do hello worlds. We'll do an H2 this time to make it more interesting. Variety is the spice of life. All right, and then we'll add our code. Let's select the div. Turn it into a Kendo window, center it, open it, love it. It's all good. And my text is a little bit large, so it's going to wrap there. Reduce it. All right, so let's back up and go over what we did again. We created an iframe and we put this index page and we removed everything out of the main page except for this iframe. And then in the iframe is this index. This is the content of the iframe, where we can include Kendo and we can use inline script and we won't be blocked at all. With these changes, I should be able to come back here and reload this app here. And let's see, I've made probably some ridiculous mistake again. I probably need to reload from here. There we go. And we have the window again. You can see there's a little bit of styling that we need to do here. That's the iframe that's kind of squinched up, and the reason is because the body isn't 100% of the height. We can fix that really easily by coming in here and just saying that we want the height to be, for the body at least, to be 100%. and that'll fix that issue for us. Now, that's all well and good, but we haven't talked about how we're going to communicate between the two pages. So let's assume for an instance that we want to use the file system API that the Chrome packaged apps provide, which is a really, really nifty API. To get started doing that, we need to declare in our manifest a permissions block to say that we're going to use it. So I'm going to say permissions, and permissions is an array, and then one of the permissions is simply file system, and that's if you want to read or write to the file system, just like that. And it needs to be permissions. And don't worry, if you mess up the manifest, the extension will be sure and tell you it won't even load it. So once we've declared the permission, let's go ahead and build the UI to actually go in and pick the file off the file system. So up here, we're not going to say hello world anymore because hello world is for noobs and we're not noobs. So we'll just leave the div and we'll make that our window. And then I'm going to put a button up here and we'll have the button just say pick a file, pick a rile. How about pick a file? That makes even more sense. And then I'll give it a class of kButton because we're using Kendo UI. It's got some nicely styled buttons. And I'm using the new Bootstrap theme, which is my new favorite theme. Works great with Twitter Bootstrap. So I've got this button, and let's just attach a click event to it. And when the click event fires, we want to actually pick a file off the file system. So I'll get the button, and in this case, I only have one button on the page, but this, of course, would attach an event to all buttons, which you wouldn't necessarily ordinarily want, or maybe you would, I don't know. And in that function, I'm simply going to, this is where we're going to call the file system. Okay. So the way that we're going to communicate between the index page and the main page up here, which is going to actually execute the code to get the file off the file system, is using this little plugin here called the PKG plugin. Now, it turns out that we can send messages between index and main using something called a post message. And we can send through the post message a message, and then we can respond to that message on the other side. And we're going to do that with something called pub/sub, or the observer pattern. Now, if all of this sounds like a lot, you don't need to know anything about post message, and you don't need to know anything about pub/sub. All you really need to know is that the PKG plugin is going to do all of this for you, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works. The PKG plugin is it's a static object, or singleton, not really singleton, a static instance of an object. And what you do essentially is you have to initialize it and tell it where you're going to be sending messages. So, of course, the first thing that we need to do when using any sort of JavaScript file is include it. It's not going to work very well otherwise. There we go. And we'll add that in here. And we did talk about the fact that these are completely separate pages, so we're going to need to add it over here as well, and I'll put it down here at the bottom. So that will include the plugin for us. Now, once we've dropped these files in, we can actually access this PKG plugin directly off of the jQuery namespace like this. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to initialize it. And when we initialize it, we pass in the window that we want to send messages to and receive messages from. So in our case, this index file is in an iframe, and I can get a reference to the containing page, the main.html, by saying window.top. Okay? Now, in the main.js file, I can actually get a reference to the iframe by saying iframe.contentWindow. But I need to get a reference to this iframe, so I'm going to go ahead and begin writing some code here. And this is just an anonymous function here. Everything's kind of wrapped up to protect the global namespace. And then in here, we're going to go ahead and grab that. Let's see, let's init the main. Here we go. So I've got a reference to the iframe here. This is just getting the element by its ID and initializing the PKG plugin. So I've initialized it here, and I initialized it in the index.html file. And with that, we're ready to start passing messages back and forth. So when I come down here, I can say, I want you to send a message. So pkg.send, and the message I want you to send is file, or excuse me, select file. Now these strings, this is just a string. It could be any message at all, right? I mean, it could be whatever you want it to be. And then you can pass an optional array of parameters. In this case, I'm not passing parameters, so I don't need to send anything there. I just want to send a message to tell the main file, hey, execute a function to get a file off the file system because you have access and I do not. In the main.js file, let's go ahead and implement that code. So I'm going to come down here and pull up my snippets again. I love me some snippets. And let's get that select file. All right, I'm going to scale this back a little bit. Let's get rid of the sidebar. So what I'm doing here is I am listening for the select file, and then I'm going to use the chrome.filesystem.chooseFile. This is one of the nifty APIs that we can use, and I can restrict it to just image types here. So a couple image types, and this will give us a file entry right here, and then you just need to read it using a file reader. And when it's done, we want to send a message that the file was loaded, and we want to send the file along with the message back into the sandbox. Okay, and this line right here is what actually reads the file. This is the function that executes when the file has been read. So back in the index page, we just need to respond to that message that's coming back. Let me fix this. That's bad JavaScript. Here we go. So let's go ahead and add in and listen for that event on this side. So we will file loaded, and there we go. We've got this listen function here. So pkg.listen, and we're listening for the file loaded event, and it's going to give us the source of an image. It's going to read the image in as a base 64 image, and so we're going to create a new image element, set its source, and then when the image loads, we'll open the window, which we haven't yet defined because we yanked it. We'll set the content to be the image and center it and open it. So all we have to do now is well, we'll create our window variable, and we'll set it equal to an instance of the Kendo window. So we, hello is our div up here. Is it still there? Yep, there it is. And then we'll say Kendo window, and then we'll just say visible is equal to false. And of course, this will create a Kendo window, but it will not display it by default. So the flow is that somebody clicks on the button, this message is sent, it's received here, the file is picked off the file system, it is returned along with this message, and the whole time the index page is listening for that message, and when it's fired, it fires here, creates a new image, and throws it into the Kendo window. So assuming that I have done all this correctly, what are the chances? I'll hop back over and let's refresh here, reload, and we get to pick a file. Let's see. All right. Let me go ahead and reload my extension to make sure I'm not making a silly mistake. All right, and there we go. We get the file picker when I do pick file. So I can scroll down. I've got a file I like to show here. I just select it, and let's see. I've made some sort of silly error. Let's see what it is. Okay, let's go back. Adjust our code just slightly. The thing about it is whenever you're actually setting a variable equal to a window object, you need to get it off of the data per jQuery plugin specifications. There we go. Live coding is so much fun. And then we'll find cats. Where's my cats? My cats GIF. If you've ever seen me do a presentation before, then you've seen this GIF. I always show it. All right, there we go. And our body's a little wonky still, so let me just fix the style a little bit on the main page. So 100% is not a valid style, but width is. It helps if you write valid CSS, as it turns out. Let me launch this again. Maybe running in the background, but we'll pull it up. There we go, and we'll bring in our cats GIF. All right, so my style's not being picked up. I need to reload the extension, but you can see that we're now actually picking this file off of the file system and displaying it in the window with Kendo UI. So that's kind of your primer on how to use Kendo UI within a packaged app. Now, once you decide to go this route and you're using Kendo UI in your packaged app, what can you do? Well, for you, I put together the Kendo UI Packaged App Bootstrap, and this contains the PKG plugin. You can find this at my GitHubs, and I'm sure we'll post all these resources. Let's see here. I'm getting a message, an urgent chat message. I'll check while it's loading here. Height 100%. What did I put? Width. Man, I tell you what. Are you guys not impressed with my coding skills? Don't act like you're not impressed. Let me see if it can work now. I'm obsessed. Hello world. You know you're just dying to see this cat GIF. Let's do hillbillies instead. They're a lot of fun. Oh, there we go. All right, cool. So there you go. That's just kind of tweaking the iframe so that it takes up the whole whole screen there. So the package app Bootstrap is contained on my GitHub page. It contains the PKG plugin, which is right here. I should point out that this was originally written by Peter Higgins as his PubSub library, and I kind of bastardized it a little bit to make it into the PKG plugin. And it's very simple. I don't think I can say it's lightweight. I don't think you're allowed to say that anymore, but it looks small to me. But it kind of abstracts away from you having to do all the post messaging and PubSubbing yourself, hopefully making that easier. So let's take a really quick look at what that looks like. And I'm going to jump over to Canary here for a minute. And again, I would urge everybody, if you're not running Canary, to definitely run Canary because it doesn't hurt you at all. And I can't wait for this IE tab to come to Mac, just as an aside there. I'm excited about that. So when you pull up the packaged app Bootstrap, you'll see that it's actually using Twitter Bootstrap with the Bootstrap theme. It's a Bootstrap and a Bootstrap. And then, of course, you have the select file demo, which we already did. And then you have things like context menus. So you can add a new item. Man, that's the best I can do for right now. And I can add it, and then you can see it shows up. And I must have added one before. It's still there. You can add different kinds. So I can add one for myself. That's a radio button. So I can add that. Oh, I can't create a duplicate item. So let's add one for Paul. It's a radio button. And we'll add one for Todd. That's a radio button. And then you can see that you can pick Paul or you can pick Todd, but you can't pick them both. Such a conundrum in life. There we go. And there's different types. You can add separators and checkboxes. There's notifications. So this isn't really a Chrome packaged app specific API, and I believe Paul had said that this was going to change and become quite a bit more robust, but you can create a simple notification here. Hey man, learn some CSS, bro. All right, create notification, and you can see it pop down up here at the top. You can also do video. I included this because it just shows the fact that you can actually transfer a video, because video is not allowed in the sandbox at the moment, to the best of my knowledge, from the main file to the index file, also using the same methodology that we did before. So I can turn this on. There I am. See my Christmas tree in the background. And there's also this text-to-speech, which I really want to be able to show you guys, but I can't because all the sound is coming through my headphones. But if I click on any one of these, probably can't hear that. But you can come in here and put your own text in as well. And these are just showing off some of the different Kendo widgets. So this is a combo box, of course. And then over here we have a numeric stepper. This one's pretty cool. This is the idle state, so you can actually detect when a user is idle or has been idle for a certain amount of time. 15 seconds is the lowest amount that you can go. But you can actually check for locked status as well. So if it's important for your app to know when the user's been idle for a certain amount of time or when they've locked their machine, this API will tell you that, and then you can attach a listener, and it will automatically notify you. And if you notice there, it just showed me that the user's gone idle, and if I move my mouse, it'll automatically bring me back to an active state and report on that here. So you can pick up the Chrome packaged app Bootstrap, which contains the plugin, over at the GitHub's page here, and that plugin doesn't have to be used with Kendo UI. You can use it with whichever UI library you want. It's just a jQuery plugin. Let's talk about, we have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to just run over real quick. When we talk about building the camera app, I'm going to bring up that code just shortly and have a look at it here. So when we talk about building the camera app, you're talking about an app of some size. It's not Hello World. It's not picking pictures of hillbillies off your hard drive. That's all well and good, but when you talk about building a full-featured application, you're talking about something quite a bit different. So I'm going to pull this application up here, and you can actually pull this one down off of GitHub as well. It's in the Chromium source, but it's also still on GitHub for the time being, which is probably an easier way to get at it. And it's under the Telerik org, but it is a public repo, free for you to read there. Let me see if I can get directly at it. It's the Chrome Cam. So you can go ahead and feel free to clone this. Here it is right here. And then there's instructions on how to get it running, because it does have some steps to it. So if you take a look at this application, it's got here, this is the actual extension. And there's actually a compile step that we go through to create this extension. So I can actually remove this here. I'll remove this folder because I don't need it. And the source for this application, we have extension code And then we have Chrome code here, which is our API code, and then the actual application itself. So this is kind of the sandbox, if you will. This is the Chrome APIs, and then this is anything that doesn't fit into those two categories. But what's important to notice here is that this entire application is written in CoffeeScript, and if that makes you a little bit nervous, I totally understand. I get it. I'm a CoffeeScript guy, and so it made sense for me to write a larger application in CoffeeScript. But what's important to note about this application is that it uses something called require.js. And it uses require.js, and it's very, very modular. And so all of the UI is broken up into these different areas. So you have the bar, which is at the bottom, the camera itself, the effects, the gallery. And so in each one of these, you have sort of an autonomous unit of work. And I'll open one of these up. The JavaScript's not terribly pretty to look at because it is generated. But I'll open up one of these files for you so you can see exactly what it looks like here. So here's the actual file, and you can see that it has all the different methods, and this is responsible just for showing the gallery. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything else. And there's a library called require.js that stitches all of these items together. And of course, I've only got 3 minutes. We only had an hour today. Not enough time to show you how to use require.js. But essentially, you drop here's the HTML that creates the app, and then you drop the require.js in, and you give it a starting point, and then it goes through and it figures out what all the dependencies are for your JavaScript files, and it loads them all in. So it's almost like giving your JavaScript sort of a class structure and being able to have includes in the top of your file. There's a special little syntax, but it's nothing big. And then when this application is actually built, what happens is I use a build tool called Jake, and again, this isn't really important. It's just specific to this app. But what it does is it calls a command line tool called r.js, which goes ahead and concatenates and minifies all of the code that it takes to run this application, and it sticks it right here in this folder in this main.js file, and you can see that this file is, see if I can get down to the end. So it's 5,000 lines long, but what it's doing is it's taking all those different files and it's stitching them together for me into one big file like this. And it also puts all my HTML templates in here, everything. So this is kind of your DLL or your jar or your compiled file as you go to your Chrome app, and this runs completely fine inside of the sandbox. And I found require.js to be an absolutely beautiful solution for building a large app that's a maintainable app, because as we all know, you can't very well have a single page application and have all of your code in the same page. That doesn't make for a very scalable project of any size at all. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today. I know that I had a lot of resources. There's a lot of code. There was a lot of links. We'll definitely be posting that probably in a follow-up blog post. And I finished 1 minute early, so I feel pretty happy about that. And I learned that I need to bone up on my CSS as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Todd, I think, to go to some Q&A for the last 15 minutes here.
Perfect. Thank you, Burke, and thank you, Paul, and thank you, everybody, for attending today for the Chrome Packaged Apps 101. Obviously, we covered a lot of territory in a pretty short time. Hopefully, you found that as useful as I found it. Learned a lot here. Thanks a lot, guys. As Burke mentioned, we are going to transition to a bit of a Q&A period here where we'll try to get Burke and Paul to answer a few of your questions that you've been logging throughout the session in the Q&A Manager. If you have questions that you want to ask, now's a great time to go put those in the Q&A Manager, and we'll spend about 10 minutes trying to answer some of these questions. There's some really great stuff in here. If you do need to drop off and run at the top of the hour here, then this whole presentation is being recorded. It'll be rendered and uploaded to YouTube later today. So if you need to go back and watch any of this, if Burke went by at lightning speed for you and you want to slow down that CoffeeScript, it'll all be on YouTube soon. So watch the Kendo UI Twitter account. We'll send a link out as soon as the video is available. Otherwise, guys, let's do a little Q&A. We got some great questions from the audience today. One question I think is pretty fundamental, worth starting with. John wants to know, what is Canary? You guys kept talking about Canary and Chrome Canary. What is that?
Yeah, so Canary is a nightly build of Chrome. It's got like the latest and greatest features. Some of them aren't ready for prime time, but it's basically there so that we can basically test before it goes to the dev channel, so we don't break kind of Chrome completely. Yeah, so Canary's got the latest and greatest APIs. A lot of the packaged and Chrome apps thing that we've just seen now is actually making its way to the beta channel. It'll be in stable pretty soon. I know it's unstable in Chrome OS. But yeah, we have these channels like different versions of Chrome: stable, beta, dev, and Canary. Stable is the one that the vast majority uses on. Beta is for kind of web developers, and dev and Canary are for the people who are kind of like really bleeding edge and they want to test everything as it lands. And then we get a lot of feedback from them about the APIs because they're the only places that some of these things are available when they first come out.
Perfect. Great. Another question comes in from a different John, and he wants to know: does the content security policy, the CSP, does it address CORS, cross-origin resource sharing? Is there any impact between CORS and CSP, or how does that work within a package app?
So it all depends on the context of what you want to try and do. So if you want to make a normal XML HTTP request, that's absolutely fine from any packet, from any part of the app, regardless of whether it's sandboxed or whether it's not in the sandbox. So CORS should work fine. The CSP itself, obviously you can, you can't. Well, yeah, I think you can start to restrict some of the XML HTTP stuff, but you can't load images directly in and a couple of other things anyway. You won't be able to get around that. However, if you want to access a service, for instance, say, I don't know, like a Google API or Instagram API, well, then you will use the permissions array. I know Burke talked about it briefly about the file system. You basically put the URL that you want to access inside that permissions array in the manifest, and then you will be able to do the, yeah, there we go, on the screen. Then you'll be able to kind of see, in that area there, you put the URL, and then the URL will be accessible regardless of whether it's CORS enabled or not.
Perfect. So you talked about the security, the sandbox. We talked about that a lot today, and about the content security policy, and a few questions came through along that. A couple of questions I'll roll together here, and Burke and Paul, you guys may be able to address these. One question asks, I don't understand why you need to state, I don't understand why you need a sandbox to open an alert, is basically the question. And another question that came after that is, if you can use an iframe to circumvent the CSP, then isn't that undermining the security in general? And maybe you can address how those two things go together, why we need to put things like alerts in the sandbox, and how iframes are still secure.
So alert itself, so we've actually disabled some of the legacy APIs inside Chrome apps, because when we say legacy APIs, the synchronous APIs that will block the user interface from rendering and like give a poor experience. And alert was one of those. There's alert confirm, some local storage, and a couple of other APIs as well, which are just kind of disabled, like document.write. They're just generally disabled because we believe they're bad for the web and bad for the platform. They may be relatively convenient, but they're actually bad for developers and users at the end. And then the second part was whether if you are using the message passing to actually break out the sandbox to go to the core functionality. This is one of those areas. It's one of those areas. It's like an extra step essentially right now, and it's very hard to. You can't basically pass HTML across as well, so it's really hard to actually do cross-site script injection, for instance, over that message barrier. So those type of things are blocked, and it's a lot harder to do. That being said, if you have a bug in your message passing code, and someone can exploit that, then that's exploitable anyway. But the things that you will allow, like dynamic execution of code straight away, generally are blocked and have to go across an extra message barrier, at least on our side of things.
Yeah, it's kind of, so interestingly enough, as Paul said, you could pass malicious arbitrary JavaScript up to the main page, but you can't execute it once it's there because you can't use new func or eval, right? So
yeah.
It remains secure. It's just a way to talk between the sandbox and the Chrome APIs in a secure manner.
I suppose it's worth mentioning that any code running in the sandbox is restricted to the same kind of security policy as code running in the normal browser, so to speak. So all the security we expect in a normal browser applies to code that runs in the sandbox.
It also has some of the same limitations as well around storage size and things like that as well.
You just touched on something there that somebody else asked about, so that's a great segue. A number of people are asking about local data storage, particularly around the ability to use things like SQLite or some kind of SQLite database in a Chrome app. And other people ask for things like app cache, and offline storage, do the same browser storage limits apply to packaged apps?
So actually, if you look at the screen now, it says unlimited storage. For packaged applications, if you have this inside your manifest, you'll basically pretty much get unlimited storage. I say unlimited. Obviously, there's a certain amount of space that is available on the drive, but you don't have those same restrictions in place. That being said, we're still in this phase at the moment where we're trying to sort out WebSQL. WebSQL is pretty much only supported by Chrome and Safari. So the method of choice for storing data, we're basically telling everyone IndexedDB is the way to go if you want to store any structured data, and then you can use the HTML5 file system, which it's separate to the file system permission that you see there. That file system permission is to access on the desktop. This sandbox file system is like files and data that are kind of completely isolated inside your application. So you can have essentially a file system inside your app which no other application can read and write to, and you have unlimited storage in that. So if you're storing kind of big blobs of data, then you can go down that route and use that storage mechanism. So I think the main story is that WebSQL is not, which is WebSQL, which is SQLite implementation in Chrome at least, is not directly available inside Chrome apps. The preference is to go with IndexedDB.
Cool. And I sort of a tangent follow-up to that related to the file system. I know we saw Burke show a neat file picker. A question comes in: are we going to have full access to the file system, or at least all the home folders, for example, in packaged apps?
So this is one of those ones where we're not going to have it at launch. We're pretty scared about some of the things that, if user grants full access mistakenly to to a drive, for instance, and then something malicious happens, then that's bad, and we don't want that to happen. And especially if you look at mobile platforms generally don't really have this concept of really easily being able to access the file system, just like kind of special isolated areas. Which, when you look at the Media Gallery API, that's our first step into letting the user select and give permission for the application to be able to access certain directories. The Media Gallery API, though, only lets you look at, I think, images, video, and audio. It doesn't let you look at, say, Word documents and text files and executables and all that type of stuff. So it's not as full as you might want, but it's the first step on that kind of path to giving you, the developer, access to files on the user's hard drive.
Perfect. And we'll take a few more questions here. We got just a couple more minutes. Burke, some questions that came through for you, particularly on the demo. You had a file, kendo.bootstrap.min.css, in your Hello World demo. Is that public? Is that something you created? What is that?
That's a great question. That's the new Kendo Bootstrap theme that we released with the Q3. It's designed to go with Twitter Bootstrap, and Twitter Bootstrap, of course, is awesome because it allows you to lay things out very, very simply with rows and spans. And so our Bootstrap theme is just designed to complement that. So it's just part of the Q3 release.
It's part of the latest Kendo UI release. Cool.
Yeah.
And now some people are asking, Mark asked, you were writing an awful lot of kind of plumbing code just to get a simple program going. Can all this be packaged up or bootstrapped instead of writing that so that they can focus on just building the app? What is a great way for somebody to jump into this without doing as much of that plumbing?
Well, sure. So the packaged app Bootstrap is probably the best place to get started. Of course, there is a lot of superfluous code in there, but if people want to, I mean, I can create a more scaled back version. But once you have the plumbing set up, it's pretty simple to go from there. But admittedly, there is a little bit. You do need to add the PKG plugin. You do need to initialize it. You do need to have the iframe and your app configured correctly. So I would definitely recommend getting your hands on the Kendo UI packaged app Bootstrap, which contains everything that you need to know in all of the plumbing code.
So sort of two follow-up questions then to this, and I think the second one Paul can comment on as well. In general, based on what they saw with yours, the audience wants to know, is it necessary to have a native HTML file and then a sandbox HTML file and exchange messages in order to have the best of both contexts? And I think the way that can perhaps be perceived or asked differently is, do you always have to have this sandbox file and then this primary file, or is that just an architecture decision for you? And when are the right times to use those?
That's a great question. So that's the way that I have always done it. I'll turn it over to Paul here in a minute. Maybe he's got some different ideas. I know we had tried to do it a couple of different ways, but that was the way that I settled on. It was most straightforward to me. Paul, do you have any ideas on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the app, obviously, that you want to make. If you just want to kind of use like a basic app without any kind of advanced functionality, like some of the APIs and everything, then it's actually quite easy to do create window on your main or your background.js. You would just do a create window, and then one of the attributes I believe that you can put in is sandbox. So you'd say the frame type is sandbox, and it should run it as it would be from as you would have specified in the manifest. So there's supposed to be an extra way of being able to make a sandboxed iframe without necessarily having to have it in the manifest. So there's that as an option. But that means that you'd have to use the background page if you wanted to pass messages between the two to have that extra logic.
So sort of related to that, Oscar asks, are there any step-by-step tutorials on how to package apps? Well, let me split the question that he's asked. Are there any step-by-step tutorials for packaging apps to build these packaged apps? And then a sort of secondary question is, do you have to build separate packaged apps for all of your target operating systems like Mac and Windows, kind of like Cordova requires? Is that a requirement with Chrome packaged apps?
So,
so right now, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that's one of the great things. The camera app that you saw, that same when I ran that Jake and I got that package, I can load that on Windows. I can load it on Ubuntu. I can load it on OS 10. I can even load it on. It even runs on Chrome OS. So there's actually specifically in regards to that kind of cross-platform, absolutely, and which is the first time I've ever even seen that. Paul can give more information.
Yeah, on the mobile side at the moment, it's like I said, it's really early on in that whole process. And right now, because it's based off Cordova, you have to do the same type of steps for the mobile side of things. But like Burke said, for the desktop, basically any place where Chrome's supported now, these applications with one package will be able to run on those platforms.
Perfect. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. That's a neat advantage. So I think we're right up on our time, which means I'll make this our last question. If your question didn't get answered today, I'll make sure that all these questions get shared with Burke and Paul so they can try to follow up with you afterwards. And of course, make sure you connect with Burke and Paul on Twitter at Paul_Kinlan and at Burke Holland. They'd love to answer your questions there too, I'm sure. So last question, guys, and I think it's sort of a good place to end. What version of Chrome do our audience members need if they want to start building packaged apps? Current version they've got, or what do they need special to get started?
So I would say so we've only just had the ability to upload these into the Chrome Web Store. They're not really available for stable users, so which I believe is M23, version 23, or 22. They are on 23 on Chrome OS, but with a limited set of APIs. I would say 24 or 25 would be the ones where they would be potentially more more unstable than they are now, if that makes sense. So if you're a developer, I would always either go with the dev channel. It's updated weekly. The beta channel as well would be a good target to aim for right now if you want to kind of get a good idea of what will be unstable in, let's say, a couple of weeks' time. So beta or dev, Canary if you want super bleeding edge features, but be warned.
So if somebody wants to do packaged apps today, make sure they've got at least the Chrome dev channel and then follow the links and resources we shared, and that should give them enough to get started today and certainly watch as Chrome evolves to share their apps with other people. Now, maybe I'll make that our last question since you sort of touched on it. We're obviously early. We're trying to get developers educated so they can start building some awesome packaged apps. If they wanted to get these apps into end users' hands, into customers' hands, you mentioned that it's not quite ready for the main channel. When should developers be thinking? Do they have time now to start working on this so they can reach
They definitely
users?
have time now to start working on these things. You can also test it with, in theory, with users who you would trust to be like beta testers, because you can upload these applications into the store today, but they won't go to every single user and they won't be discoverable. But if you give a user a link, they'll be able to go and download the app and install it and kind of play with it and to see how it looks and feels and give you a lot of feedback that way. Once we're happy and we want to push it to stable, then I'm pretty sure that the web store as well will be opened up to these applications as well. So you can definitely start today. They'll give you some good time to get going.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Paul. Thanks again, Burke. We really appreciate the answers and the content. Thank you again, everybody else, for attending today. The recording will be up on YouTube soon, and we hope to see you guys again soon for another developer webcast. We hope you have fun building Chrome packaged apps and using Kendo UI.